Imagine building an empire from nothing, working day and night until the world calls you a billionaire. But just when you think you've won, fate throws you face to face with the one person who once broke your heart. Only this time, she's homeless on the street. What would you do? Grab your popcorn because this story is about love, betrayal, and second chances that no one saw coming. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that will keep you glued to your screen till the very end. Christopher Hale was the kind of man who commanded respect the moment he walked into a room. At just 32, he was the billionaire CEO of Hale Enterprises, a company that stretched across real estate, tech, and international trade. His name appeared on magazine covers, his face was plastered across billboards, and his every move was followed by the press. To the world, Chris had it all: power, money, luxury cars, a sprawling mansion that could rival a palace. But behind the glossy image, Chris carried a silent emptiness. Success had given him everything except the one thing he had once wanted most: love. Years ago, before the world knew his name, Chris had been an ordinary man with nothing but dreams. He worked odd jobs, studied at night, and believed that love was enough to carry him through life's struggles. And back then, he had Sophia. Sophia was his first love, the girl who knew him before the suits, before the fame, before the empire. They had planned a future together, whispered promises of building a life side by side. But promises shattered the day she left him for a wealthy businessman, claiming she couldn't endure a life of poverty and struggle. Chris had never forgotten the sting of that betrayal. It burned in his chest every time he signed a deal, every time he added another zero to his fortune. In many ways, Sophia's rejection had fueled his ambition. She didn't believe in him then, so he made sure the whole world would. Now, sitting in the back seat of his sleek black car, Chris scrolled through financial reports on his tablet. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, the neon glow of billboards flickering across his sharp features. His driver slowed at a red light near a busy intersection, and Chris glanced outside, hardly noticing the clusters of people huddled in the cold. Then, his eyes caught a figure that made his heart stop. On the corner of the street, beneath the dim glow of a broken street lamp, a woman sat hunched against the wall. Her hair was tangled, her clothes worn and dirty, her hands clutching a small, tattered bag, as though it held the last pieces of her life. For a moment, Chris almost looked away. Homelessness was something he'd seen countless times in the city. Tragic, yes, but distant. But there was something about her face, something achingly familiar. He leaned forward, his voice tense. "Stop the car!" The driver obeyed, pulling over to the side. Chris's eyes narrowed, his pulse quickening. As the woman shifted, lifting her head just slightly, the truth slammed into him like a blow. It was her, Sophia, the same Sophia who once laughed under the stars with him, who once kissed him like he was her whole world, who once told him she couldn't waste her youth on a man with empty pockets. Only now she was broken, ragged, almost unrecognizable. Chris's throat tightened. Memories flashed. The night she walked away, the sting of her words, the hollow he'd carried for years. And now fate had dragged her back into his life, not as the queen she once dreamed of becoming, but as a beggar on the streets. Sophia lifted her eyes, and for a split second, their gazes locked. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by shame. She quickly looked down, pulling her bag closer as if she could disappear into the shadows. Chris sat frozen in the car, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to step out, to ask what had happened, to demand why fate had reduced her to this. Another part of him wanted to drive away, to leave her in the same darkness she had once left him in. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't look away. His chest ached with emotions he thought he had buried years ago. Anger, pity, sadness, and something else he dared not name. The light turned green. The driver glanced in the mirror. "Sir, should we go?" Chris didn't answer. He simply sat there, torn between past wounds and present reality. And in that moment, he realized his empire, his billions, his victories. None of it had prepared him for this. because nothing shocked him more than seeing the woman who once broke his heart, now broken herself. The driver hesitated when Chris didn't answer. "Sir?" Chris's jaw tightened. "Pull over." The car eased to the curb, and before he could change his mind, Chris stepped out into the cold night air. His polished shoes clicked against the pavement as he walked toward him. The figure huddled under the flickering street lamp. Sophia flinched when she noticed him coming closer. She tried to shrink back into the shadows, pulling her tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders. But the closer he got, the more undeniable it became. This was no stranger. This was Sophia. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Chris's sharp suit and commanding presence looked almost unreal against her ragged appearance. The last time he'd seen her, she had been radiant, dressed in designer clothes, her hair styled to perfection, her laughter echoing as she climbed into another man's car. Now that image was gone. "Chris," her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Shame laced every syllable. He swallowed hard. Sophia. The name felt foreign on his tongue, like speaking to a ghost. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked away, clutching her bag like a shield. "Please don't look at me like this." Chris's chest tightened. He didn't know what he expected. Anger, excuses, maybe even arrogance. But instead, what he saw before him was a shattered beauty, a woman humbled by life in ways he couldn't have imagined. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. Though part of him wasn't sure he wanted the answer, she let out a bitter laugh, one that carried no joy. "Life happened. Choices happened. And now..." She gestured weakly at herself, her thin fingers trembling. "Now this is all that's left of me." Chris studied her carefully. The Sophia he once knew had been full of fire and ambition, unwilling to settle for less. She was the one who left him behind when he couldn't give her the world fast enough. And now here she was, stripped of everything she had once chased. "Doesn't your husband take care of you?" Chris asked, the word husband sour in his mouth. Sophia flinched as if struck. "He's gone. Left years ago after draining everything. When he realized I wasn't useful anymore, he replaced me with someone younger, richer. My family, they cut ties too. Said I made my bed so I should lie in it." Her voice cracked, and she wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "And now I'm here." On the streets, invisible Chris's hands curled into fists in his pockets. He had dreamed of this moment before, back when her betrayal was fresh. He had imagined seeing her fall, imagined the satisfaction it would bring him. But standing here now, all he felt was an ache deep in his chest. "You chose this," he said, his tone sharper than he intended. "You left me because I had nothing. You traded love for wealth, and now..." "I know," she cut in, her voice breaking. "I know I made the biggest mistake of my life. Every night I think about it. I think about you, Chris, about how I walked away from the only person who ever truly loved me. And look at me now. Look at what I became." Her words silenced him. The rain that threatened overhead finally began to drizzle, the drops splattering on the pavement between them. Chris stared at her, at the woman who had once been his entire world, now reduced to a broken figure on the street. Sophia pulled her shawl tighter and whispered, "You don't have to pity me. Just walk away, Chris. Forget you saw me." Something inside him twisted. He could walk away. He had every reason to. She had left him when he was nothing. Now he was everything, and she was the one with nothing. This could have been his moment of revenge, his chance to leave her in the same darkness she once left him in. But instead, he stood there, frozen. His heart waged war against his pride. Finally, he stepped back. "Get some rest tonight," he said coldly. Then he turned and walked back toward his car, his steps heavy with conflict. Sophia bowed her head, tears spilling freely. She had braced herself for his anger, but his indifference cut deeper. Watching him leave was like losing him all over again. Chris climbed into the car without another word. As the driver pulled away, he cast one last glance at the figure fading into the night. His chest burned, his mind replaying her broken voice, her haunted eyes. For the rest of the ride, he said nothing. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Sophia, not the girl who betrayed him, but the woman left behind in the cold, carrying the weight of her mistakes. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the thought. What if walking away wasn't the answer? Christopher Hale had faced countless battles in boardrooms, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and outsmarted ruthless rivals. But nothing, absolutely nothing, was as difficult as the storm raging in his chest that night. He sat alone in his penthouse, high above the glittering city, surrounded by luxury most people could only dream of. His marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers. The skyline stretched endlessly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Yet none of it brought him peace. His mind kept replaying the sight of Sophia under that street lamp, her eyes hollow, her clothes torn, her voice trembling as she admitted to losing everything. He had thought seeing her broken would heal the scar she left years ago, but instead it ripped it open again. Chris poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat on the edge of his leather chair. He remembered the nights they spent together back when he had nothing. The way she encouraged his dreams, the laughter they shared over bowls of instant noodles, the warmth of her hand in his. For a moment, those memories softened him, but then another memory crashed in. The night she left. "Chris," she had said, her eyes cold but resolute, "I can't live like this anymore. Struggling, scraping by. You have dreams, but dreams don't pay the bills. I need more. I deserve more." He had begged her to stay, promised he would make it. But she walked out, her heels clicking against the floor like hammers pounding on his heart. Chris downed the whiskey in one gulp, bitterness tightening his jaw. Why should he help her now? She had chosen money over love. And now, stripped of it all, she wanted his pity? No, he muttered to himself, slamming the glass on the table. She made her choice. Let her live with it. But even as the words left his lips, his heart ached. The image of Sophia clutching her shawl against the cold refused to fade. Meanwhile, across the city, Sophia curled up in a corner of an abandoned building, her bag serving as a makeshift pillow. The drizzle had turned into heavy rain, soaking through the holes in her shoes and chilling her to the bone. She thought about Chris, how his eyes had pierced her soul when he saw her, how his voice carried both anger and sorrow. She never expected to see him again, not like this. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "I don't deserve his kindness." Not after what I did, but a small part of her heart longed for it anyway. Sophia closed her eyes, hunger gnawing at her stomach. The life she once flaunted, the expensive clothes, the lavish parties, the wealthy man she left Chris for, had all crumbled into dust. And the cruel irony was clear. The man she abandoned had risen to heights she could never imagine, while she had fallen lower than she ever thought possible. Back in his penthouse, Chris paced the floor restlessly. Every logical thought told him to forget Sophia, to let her suffer the consequences of her choices. But compassion gnawed at him. He remembered the girl she once was, kind, full of dreams, someone who had loved him before ambition consumed her. He sat at his desk, staring at a photo on his shelf. It was old, worn at the edges, a picture of them in their younger years, smiling as if the world belonged to them. He had never thrown it away, though he told himself it was only to remind him of why he worked so hard. But deep down, he knew the truth. A part of him had never stopped caring. Chris clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. "Why do I still care?" he muttered. He had built an empire, left the past behind, yet Sophia's presence had the power to shake him to his core. Finally, he sank into his chair, closing his eyes. Logic screamed for revenge, but his heart whispered something else, compassion. The next day, Sophia wandered the streets in search of food. She stopped at a bakery, the smell of fresh bread torturing her empty stomach. She dug through her bag, pulling out a few coins, not nearly enough. The cashier frowned. "Sorry, miss, that won't cover it." Humiliation burned her cheeks. She turned to leave when a kind stranger placed money on the counter. "Get her something warm," he said softly. Sophia turned to thank him, but he was already gone. Clutching the bread, she whispered a silent prayer. Even in her misery, small kindnesses reminded her the world wasn't completely cruel. But deep down, she wished it was Chris who had shown her that mercy. That night, Chris sat at a dinner meeting with investors, but his focus was elsewhere. While they discussed profits and mergers, he found himself drifting into thoughts of Sophia. Finally, he excused himself early, leaving the table stunned. As his car glided through the city, he leaned back and closed his eyes. "Take me by the old district," he told the driver. The driver raised an eyebrow in the mirror, but didn't question him. Chris wasn't sure what he'd do if he saw her again. Part of him still wanted to keep driving. But another part, the part he had tried to bury for years, wanted to stop, to see her, to know if she had made it through another day. And as the car turned toward the same corner where he had first spotted her, Chris braced himself for the answer he wasn't ready to face. Christopher Hale had spent the entire night pacing his penthouse like a man torn in two. Pride screamed that Sophia's suffering was her own doing, that she had abandoned him when he had nothing and deserved no compassion from him now. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her shivering under the flickering street lamp, clutching that torn shawl like a shield against the world. For a man who prided himself on control, he felt utterly powerless. The next evening, Chris ordered his driver to take him back to the same street. As the car slowed near the corner, his eyes scanned the shadows anxiously. And there she was. Sophia sat in the same spot, her knees drawn to her chest, her hair damp from the drizzle. She looked even weaker than the night before, her lips pale, her hands trembling. Chris inhaled sharply, his chest tightening. He stepped out of the car, his tall figure cutting through the dim street. People nearby paused, whispering at the sight of the billionaire approaching a homeless woman. Sophia lifted her head, and the moment her eyes met his, she flinched as if expecting him to mock her. "Why are you here?" she asked hoarsely, her voice a shadow of the vibrant tone he once knew. Chris hesitated. He wanted to lash out, to remind her of what she had done to him years ago, but the words died on his tongue. Instead, he pulled off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She gasped, stunned. "You'll catch your death sitting out here," he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes as she gripped the coat with trembling fingers. "Why? Why are you being kind to me after everything I did to you?" Chris looked at her, his jaw tight. "Because once, you were the woman I loved. And no matter how much you hurt me, I can't stand here and watch you die on the street." Sophia's lips quivered, and for a moment she looked like the girl he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Vulnerable, scared, but achingly human. She bowed her head, unable to meet his gaze. "I don't deserve this." Chris crouched to her level, his voice firm but calm. "Deserve it or not, I'm not leaving you here." Before she could protest, he helped her to her feet. She stumbled, weak from days of hunger, and he caught her by the arm. Carefully, he guided her to the car. The driver glanced in the mirror but said nothing as Chris helped Sophia into the seat. They rode in silence through the city. Sophia kept her eyes lowered, ashamed, while Chris stared out the window, lost in a storm of thoughts. When they arrived, Chris didn't take her to the mansion. He wasn't ready to open that part of his life to her, not yet. Instead, he led her into a furnished apartment he kept for business days. Sophia's eyes widened at the sight. Though modest by his standards, the apartment looked like paradise compared to the streets. Clean floors, a warm bed, shelves stocked with food. Her hands trembled as she touched the edge of the sofa. This is too much." Chris poured her a glass of water and handed it to her. "Drink," he said firmly. She obeyed, gulping it down as if she hadn't had a proper drink in days. Then she whispered, "Chris, why are you doing this? Why not just leave me out there?" His eyes hardened. "Because I know what it feels like to be left with nothing. And I swore I'd never let myself turn into the kind of person who could ignore someone in need, no matter what they did to me." Sophia pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. "I hurt you. I chose someone else because I was scared. I thought I could buy happiness, but all I did was lose everything that mattered." Chris didn't answer immediately. He watched her carefully, noting how fragile she looked, how raw her words were. Part of him still burned with resentment, but another part, the part that still remembered their late-night talks and shared dreams, softened. "You don't have to explain right now," he said finally. "You need rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk." He showed her to the guest room, where clean sheets and a soft mattress awaited. Sophia stood at the doorway, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you." Chris's voice was quiet. Don't thank me yet. As she disappeared into the room, closing the door softly behind her, Chris leaned against the wall, running a hand over his face. Helping her didn't erase the past. It didn't erase the betrayal. But as much as he wanted to pretend otherwise, seeing her suffer tore at him in a way he couldn't ignore. That night, while Sophia slept under a warm roof for the first time in years, Chris stared out at the city lights from the balcony, wondering if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, or taken the first step toward healing wounds that had never fully closed. The next morning, Sophia woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through clean curtains. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. The mattress beneath her was soft, the air smelled faintly of lavender, and the sound of city traffic outside felt distant. Then she remembered Chris had brought her here. Her throat tightened. She glanced around the neat room, spotting a folded set of clothes on the dresser. Simple, jeans and a blouse, but new. A small note lay on top in Chris's firm handwriting. Take your time. Breakfast is in the kitchen. Her hands shook as she picked it up. How could he still care enough to give her dignity when she had once stripped his away? Sophia dressed slowly, her mind heavy with shame. When she stepped into the kitchen, the smell of coffee greeted her. Chris sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, his suit jacket already on. He looked every bit the powerful billionaire, yet his eyes softened when they landed on her. You should eat, he said, nodding to the plate in front of her. Eggs, toast, and fruit. Sophia sat cautiously. Chris, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything yet, he replied, his voice clipped. Eat first. She obeyed, though every bite lodged in her throat. Finally, she set her fork down, unable to hold it in anymore. I owe you the truth. Chris leaned back, folding his arms. Then tell me, why did you leave? Her eyes brimmed with tears. I was young. Scared. We had nothing, Chris. I watched you work yourself to the bone, chasing dreams that felt impossible. I didn't want to spend my life in hunger and struggle. When Daniel came along, with his money, his promises of comfort, I convinced myself it was the smarter choice. I told myself I deserved security. But the truth is, I was selfish. I didn't believe in you, and I didn't believe in us. Chris's jaw tightened at the name of the man she left him for. The memory still stung. And where did it get you? He asked coldly. Sophia's lips quivered. Nowhere. Daniel used me until I had nothing left. When I couldn't give him the perfect life he wanted, he threw me away. My so-called friends disappeared, my family refused to take me back, and I ended up on the streets. Every night I thought about you, about how I walked away from the only man who truly loved me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect kindness. I needed you to know. Silence hung between them, thick with years of pain. Chris stared at her, his emotions at war. Part of him wanted to lash out, to remind her of the humiliation she caused him. Another part saw only the broken woman before him, stripped of pride, begging not for wealth, but for understanding. You don't get to rewrite the past, he said finally, his tone sharp. You broke me, Sophia. Do you know what it felt like to be told I wasn't enough? To watch you walk away because I couldn't give you money? That pain is why I worked myself to the edge of insanity. Every deal I made, every sleepless night, it was because I swore I'd never feel that worthless again. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. I know, Chris, and I'm sorry. Sorry will never be enough. But it's all I have. You became everything I didn't believe you could. And I became nothing. Chris stood abruptly, turning to the window. His reflection stared back at him. The billionaire who had conquered the world, yet couldn't conquer the ache in his heart. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice quieter. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I even should, but, he exhaled, steadying himself. I can't ignore what I saw on that street. I can't leave you to rot while I sleep in silk sheets. Not after what we once shared. Sophia's sobs grew harder, her hands covering her face. She had expected anger, maybe even hatred, but this honesty cut deeper. Chris turned back to her, his gaze steady. You'll stay here until you can stand on your own again. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to be the kind of man who abandons someone when they're down. I won't be like the man you chose over me." Sophia looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Chris, I don't deserve your mercy." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but sometimes mercy isn't about what people deserve. It's about what we choose to give." For the first time in years, Sophia saw a glimpse of the man she once loved. Fierce, proud, but with a heart that refused to harden completely. And for Chris, though forgiveness still felt far away, he realized something. Helping Sophia wasn't about reopening old wounds. It was about proving to himself that he was stronger than the bitterness she left behind. That night, as Sophia sat in the guest room, hugging the blanket to her chest, she whispered a silent prayer. Not for luxury, not for a return to the past, but for a chance to earn back her dignity. And in the next room, Chris lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if helping Sophia would finally bring him peace or break his heart all over again. Word spreads quickly in the city's social circles. Whispers of Christopher Hale sheltering a mysterious woman reach the ears of his business partners in the media. Paparazzi lurk outside his properties, hungry for a scandal. His board members, anxious about the company's image, start to press him with veiled warnings. At a shareholders' Sequini dinner, one of the older men leaned toward Chris with a smirk. "Mr. Hale, I hear you've taken in unusual company." A homeless woman, wasn't it? Not exactly the kind of companion a man of your stature should be entertaining. People are beginning to talk. Chris set down his glass of wine, his gaze cold. "Let them talk." The man chuckled nervously, realizing too late that Chris's tone wasn't playful. The billionaire's authority silenced the table, but inside Chris, the tension burned. He had spent years building his reputation, and now it felt like it was being tested by a single choice. Would he protect the woman who once betrayed him, or protect his empire's spotless image? Back at the apartment, Sophia watched the news with dread. Tabloids were already splashing her image across headlines. The fallen beauty and the billionaire. Hale's new weakness, from mansion to street corner. She hugged her knees to her chest, shame threatening to swallow her whole. When Chris returned late that night, she whispered, "They're mocking you because of me. Maybe I should leave before I ruin your life." Chris removed his tie, his face unreadable. "You're not going anywhere." Sophia's eyes widened. "But why? You don't owe me anything. I betrayed you, Chris. If you let me stay, the whole world will think less of you." He sighed, leaning against the wall. "Do you really think my worth is measured by their gossip? I've fought men twice as ruthless as the media. I won't let them decide who I care about." Tears blurred Sophia's vision. She had never felt smaller, yet never more seen. Days later, Chris made his move. Instead of hiding, he invited the press to a charity gala hosted by Hale Enterprises. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the city's most powerful people buzzing with curiosity. Cameras flashed as Chris walked to the stage, his tall frame commanding attention. "Tonight," he began, his deep voice echoing, "we celebrate generosity and compassion. But before we speak of charity, we must understand what it means. Charity is not writing checks for applause. It is not feeding the hungry while mocking their hunger. True charity begins with seeing people really seeing them in their lowest moments." Whispers rippled through the crowd, some guests already sensing where this was going. Chris gestured toward the back of the room. Sophia stepped forward hesitantly, her plain dress a stark contrast to the gowns around her. The cameras snapped furiously, capturing every step. "This woman," Chris continued, his voice steady, "is Sophia. Years ago, she was part of my life. Choices drove us apart, and life was unkind to her. When I saw her on the streets, I had a choice. Walk away or remember the humanity we all share. I chose the latter, and I will never apologize for it." Gasps filled the room. Some guests looked scandalized, others moved. William Banks, a rival CEO, sneered loudly. "Are we to believe the mighty Christopher Hale has traded boardrooms for beggars?" Chris's eyes flashed. "If treating someone with dignity makes me less in your eyes, then I don't want your respect. Wealth means nothing if it strips us of compassion." The room fell into stunned silence. Sophia's eyes overflowed with tears. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. She was defended, seen, and valued in front of the world. After the gala, the tabloids changed their tune. Headlines shifted. Hale defends woman from streets. Billionaire reminds world of true humanity. Some still mocked, but many praised his courage. For every critic, there were 10 voices inspired by his act. That night, back at the apartment, Sophia stood by the window, the city lights reflecting in her tear-filled eyes. "Why, Chris?" she whispered. "Why would you do all this for me after everything?" Chris stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. "Because forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about deciding what kind of person you want to be. I won't let bitterness define me, and I won't let you be defined by your worst mistake." Sophia broke down, sobbing into her hands. Chris didn't move to hold her, not yet. Their relationship wasn't healed overnight, but the seed had been planted. A second chance, not at romance alone, but at dignity, at redemption, at hope. For Chris, helping her wasn't weakness. It was proof of his greatest strength, the ability to rise above betrayal and choose compassion over revenge. And for Sophia, the shock wasn't just that he helped her. It was that he gave her back something she thought she had lost forever, her humanity. This story reminds us that revenge may satisfy pride, but mercy heals the soul. True strength isn't measured by wealth or power, but by the ability to forgive when you have every reason not to. Because in the end, kindness will always outlast bitterness. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories of love, life, and second chances.